Right now, under microscope, we can literally watch a needle technique, something that's like 3,000 years old, change the actual blood flow inside a modern IVF patient's uterus. I mean, for decades, fertility treatments have been treated purely as this Western science of exact timing, rigid medications, and, clinical statistics. And if you've ever navigated this space, you know exactly how sterile and exhausting that maze can feel. But we now have the physiological data to prove that ancient therapies can fundamentally alter the body's reproductive environment, right down to the cellular level.
Yeah, it completely reframes how we look at reproductive medicine. I mean, we are taking practices that were developed millennia before anyone even knew what an endocrine system was, and we're mapping their effects on hormones and microcirculation in real time.
Which is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring the biological mechanisms, the actual physical how and why behind acupuncture and customized herbal medicine in boosting fertility. And we're going to look at how one pioneering clinic in New York managed to fundamentally change the way Eastern and Western reproductive medicines integrate in the U.S. When I was looking through these sources, an analogy kept coming to mind. If standard IVF treatments are like planting a very precious seed, where the timing is exact and the science is precise, is complementary medicine essentially telling the soil to make sure that seed actually has an environment where it can take root?
The soil analogy works incredibly well here, mostly because we aren't talking about something abstract. We aren't talking about a spa day or just general relaxation, which is probably the most common misconception.
Right, people just assume it's about chilling out for an hour.
Exactly. We are looking at measurable physiological changes to the irrigation system of that soil, meaning blood flow, as well as the chemical balance like hormones and cellular health. You are physically preparing the environment to give that seed the absolute best chance of survival.
Okay, let's unpack the literal irrigation system then. How exactly are we preparing the ground? I mean, I understand that you stimulate an area and blood flows to it, but what is the actual mechanism when someone is lying on a table getting acupuncture before an embryo transfer?
It basically comes down to microcirculation and vasodilation. When a practitioner inserts an acupuncture needle, it creates a microtrauma.
A microtrauma. So the body is reacting to an injury.
Yeah. The body instantly responds to that localized point by releasing vasodilators, things like nitric oxide, which physically relax and widen the blood vessels in that specific area.
So the vessels are physically opening up like wider pipes.
That's it. And when we look at the clinical data for IVF populations receiving manual acupuncture before an embryo transfer, we see a distinct increase in endometrial blood flow indices. More blood is actively pumping into the lining of the uterus, which improves uterine perfusion.
And the end goal of that extra blood is just a thicker lining.
A thicker, better perfused endometrium, yes. I mean, a thick lining is highly vascularized, meaning it has the capillary network ready to connect with an implanting embryo and supply it with nutrients. That directly increases the chance of successful implantation.
Wow, okay.
But the microcirculation doesn't stop at the uterus. It also dramatically increases blood flow to the ovaries and the surrounding follicles.
Why does the follicle itself need that extra rush of blood? What's happening inside the ovary?
Well, the primary delivery is oxygen. Better blood flow provides superior oxygenation, which is critical for egg maturation. It supports what reproductive endocrinologists call embryo competence.
Embryo competence, got it.
Right. This is essentially the structural and functional health of the egg before it's even fertilized. An egg that develops in an oxygen-rich, nutrient-dense environment is fundamentally healthier than one that develops in a stagnant, poorly perfused environment.
The blood flow makes complete mechanical sense to me. The pipe gets wider, more oxygen gets delivered. But here is where it gets really interesting, and honestly where I have to push back a little on the science.
Well, go ahead.
The sources also talk heavily about nervous endocrine regulation. So, wait, sticking a needle in your leg or your arm makes a direct neurological phone call to your pituitary gland. I'm trying to visualize this. How does that specific mechanical action in a limb actually travel up to the brain to fix a hormonal imbalance?
I know, it sounds a bit like magic until you track the literal wiring of the body. You have to remember that your body is a highly integrated electrical and chemical network. When that needle stimulates a specific point, it triggers an electrical impulse.
Oh, an actual electrical signal.
Yes, an impulse that travels up the afferent nerve fibers, the sensory nerves, straight into the spinal cord, and then up to the midbrain.
So it's basically using the body's existing hardwired internet connection.
That's a good way to picture it. And the specific destination for these signals is the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. That's the command center where your brain talks to your reproductive organs. Acupuncture modulates the neural pathways influencing this command center, specifically by lowering excessive sympathetic tone.
Sympathetic tone.
Yeah.
You mean the fight or flight response?
Yes. Your sympathetic nervous system is designed to keep you alive in a crisis. When that tone is chronically high, whether from general life stress or very often the intense psychological and physical exhaustion of fertility treatments themselves, it disrupts reproductive hormone rhythms.
Right, because biologically, if your brain thinks you're under constant attack or starvation, it shuts down non-essential functions.
Exactly, and reproduction is the first thing to go.
The body essentially says, now is not a safe time to have a baby, so it scrambles the hormonal signals.
And by sending those targeted electrical impulses via the afferent nerves, acupuncture prompts the brain to downregulate that fight or flight response. It lowers the stress tone, which allows the normal, healthy hormonal rhythms to come back online.
So what does that look like for a specific condition? Because the sources mentioned PCOS. How does this electrical rewiring actually help someone with polycystic ovary syndrome?
PCOS is driven heavily by disrupted hormonal signaling, specifically an imbalance in luteinizing hormone and androgens. Trials involving electroacupuncture, where they actually run a very mild microcurrent through the needles to enhance the signal, show that it restores that hypothalamic signaling in PCOS patients.
That's wild.
Yeah, by lowering that sympathetic tone, it improves insulin sensitivity, it drops those excessive androgen levels, and it actually increases ovulation frequency. It helps the body establish a consistent luteal phase function, which is, non-negotiable if you want an embryo to implant.
Okay, so if we zoom out, we have the irrigation system working, the blood vessels are dilated, the oxygen is flowing, and the central command center has turned off the fight or flight alarm, so the hormonal signals are clear.
Right.
But it seems to me that bringing fresh blood to an area is only helpful if the destination is safe. What if the local environment in the pelvis is inherently hostile?
That is the crucial next step in the physiology. You can have the best blood flow in the world and perfect hormone pulses, but if the cellular environment is toxic, implantation will still fail. That brings us to inflammation and oxidative stress.
Right. And when we talk about a hostile environment, I immediately think of conditions like endometriosis, which I understand is fundamentally driven by severe inflammation. I've heard the word cytokine thrown around a lot when people talk about pelvic inflammation.
Sure.
But what is it actually doing inside the pelvis?
Think of a cytokine as a chemical flare gun. It's a signaling protein that tells the immune system to rush to an area and start an inflammatory response. In conditions like endometriosis, the pelvic tissues are flooded with pro-inflammatory cytokines.
It's like a false fire alarm is constantly ringing.
Yes, the body is sending all this heat, swelling, and immune cells to heal a wound that isn't really there, and it just crowds the space. The area becomes physically too hot, swollen, and chemically aggressive for a fragile embryo to survive.
So how do you fix that without medication?
Well, what the research shows is that acupuncture, especially when combined with customized herbal medicines, actively reduces the production of those pro-inflammatory cytokines. It dials down local immune activity in the pelvic region. Randomized controlled trials and systematic reviews demonstrate that this intervention significantly reduces the pain and adhesions associated with endometriosis.
By essentially turning off the false fire alarm.
By turning it off, you clear the smoke from the room. You create a much less aggressive, less hostile environment for sperm, for eggs, and for embryos, which improves the chances for fertilization across the board.
That makes perfect sense for the macroscopic environment of the pelvis. But what about the cells themselves? The research heavily emphasizes oxidative stress and protecting the DNA of the gametes, the eggs and sperm. I mean, how does a herb protect DNA?
To understand that, we have to look at reactive oxygen species, or ROS. These are highly unstable molecules missing an electron. Because they are unstable, they violently bounce around the cell, stealing electrons from anything they touch, which causes massive cellular damage.
Okay, and in the reproductive system?
In the reproductive system, this oxidative stress specifically targets and damages the mitochondrial function in eggs.
And mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. If I remember my high school biology, an egg needs a massive amount of energy to divide and grow into an embryo.
An immense amount of energy. If the mitochondria are damaged by these reactive oxygen species, the egg simply won't have the fuel to mature or divide properly. And in sperm, this same oxidative stress physically breaks apart the genetic material, causing what we call sperm DNA fragmentation.
Wow. So if oxidative stress is like corrosive rust forming on the cellular machinery of our eggs and sperm, these targeted herbal therapies, are they basically acting as a rust-proofing sealant?
The rust proofing is a good start, but it's even more active than that. It's more like a chemical rust scavenger. Individualized herbal therapies act as powerful antioxidants. An antioxidant is a molecule that willingly donates an electron to those unstable reactive oxygen species without becoming unstable itself.
Oh, so it neutralizes them before they can steal from the egg or the sperm.
Precisely. They stop the chain reaction of damage in both ovarian follicles and semen. And while the herbs are neutralizing the reactive molecules, the acupuncture is utilizing that improved microcirculation we talked about earlier to flush the cellular waste out of the system.
That is a great tag team effect.
It really is. The clinical result of this herbal antioxidant activity is preserved mitochondrial function in the eggs, dramatically lower sperm DNA fragmentation, improved overall embryo quality, and ultimately a reduced risk of miscarriage.
The fact that this impacts sperm DNA fragmentation completely shifts the perspective for me. It means we aren't just treating the female body. If the male gametes are rusting from the inside out, this is a multi-system, couple-wide issue.
It is entirely a couple-wide issue, which brings us to the psychosocial aspect, the mind-body bridge. We talked about the sympathetic nervous system earlier, but the sheer, crushing psychological weight of infertility cannot be overstated for both partners. Integrated whole system programs reliably lower physiological stress markers like cortisol and significantly reduce treatment-related anxiety.
Because cortisol is a primary stress hormone. By lowering it, you are removing those negative hormonal roadblocks on both ovulation in women and spermatogenesis in men.
Yes. And treating both partners simultaneously naturally raises overall success rates, particularly when male factor issues like DNA fragmentation are at play. You are addressing multiple root causes at once: the microcirculation, the hormonal signaling, the systemic inflammation, and the psychological stress.
So it's hitting everything.
Exactly. In clinical terms, this is a multimodal action. That's why combining acupuncture with individualized herbal care often yields much stronger physiological effects than isolated treatments.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Let's look at this from the perspective of the patient. If I am already completely overwhelmed by a rigorous IVF schedule, my calendar is packed with early morning blood draws, transvaginal ultrasounds, and very rigid medication alarms, doesn't telling me to go see an acupuncturist 3 times a week just add to my treatment fatigue? How do these complementary programs actually reduce distress rather than just adding another layer of calendar anxiety?
It is an incredibly valid concern, and it's a huge barrier for many patients. Here is where we have to look objectively at the evidence. While studies from major databases like PubMed and PMC consistently report meaningful reductions in anxiety and stress after these interventions, the certainty of that evidence varies.
Right, so it's not a magic bullet.
Exactly. It ranges from low to moderate, depending on the exact protocols used, the specific patient populations, and most importantly, how well the therapy is integrated with standard medical care. Listeners should always be consulting with a licensed practitioner and their primary fertility specialist to ensure safety. But to answer your question, it only reduces distress when it is seamlessly integrated. If the complementary care is fighting the Western schedule, it causes stress. It has to support it.
So the science is there, but practically, if I walk into a standard IVF clinic today, my doctor isn't usually handing me a customized herbal formula. There seems to be a massive disconnect in how patients actually access this combined approach without just guessing in the dark.
And that disconnect is exactly why clinical integration is so crucial. It comes down to practitioners who understand both languages, the Eastern physiological mechanisms and the Western clinical schedules, which leads us to the pioneers who figured out how to bridge that exact gap.
Yeah, let's talk about Mike Berkeley and the Berkeley Center for Reproductive Wellness, because their model is a perfect case study for this integration.
Mike Berkeley's background is fascinating because it wasn't just an academic pursuit. He is a licensed, board-certified acupuncturist and herbalist. But his entry into this specific field was deeply personal. His own wife struggled with infertility.
Oh, wow, so he really lived it.
He did. That crisis drove him to study at the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine, where he dove deeply into both Eastern and Western approaches to reproductive medicine.
And he didn't just open a generalized acupuncture practice where you go for back pain one day and fertility the next. He founded the Berkeley Center in 1997, located in Midtown East Manhattan. And what really stands out in the sources is that it remains the only complementary medicine practice in the United States solely devoted to reproductive health.
That intense specialization fundamentally changed the landscape. He is widely recognized as the first acupuncturist in the U.S. to specialize entirely in fertility issues. Before Berkeley, acupuncture for fertility was just a side offering on a long menu of general treatments. By narrowing the focus entirely to reproductive endocrinology, he was able to develop protocols that actually integrated with Western medicine rather than operating blindly alongside it.
How does a patient actually experience that integration? I mean, what does their methodology look like in practice so it doesn't clash with the IVF clinic?
It's highly data-driven. They combine traditional Chinese medicine, meaning the manual acupuncture, and those proprietary customized herbal formulas with modern technology like low-level light therapy or LLLT applied to the abdomen to further boost cellular ATP production.
Interesting.
But critically, they use Western medical testing to guide the Eastern treatments.
Oh, so they're actually looking at the patient's modern lab results, the hormone panels, the semen analysis, and they're tailoring the specific herbs or acupuncture points to match what the blood work says.
They aren't working in the dark at all. They have specialized protocols designed specifically to enhance the outcomes for assisted reproductive technologies like IVF and IUI. They focus heavily on the critical window just before and after an embryo transfer to optimize that endometrial blood flow we discussed.
Getting that lining thick and ready.
Exactly. They aggressively treat male factor infertility by targeting sperm quality and DNA fragmentation. And to directly solve that exact calendar anxiety and treatment fatigue you brought up earlier, they even offer home visits.
Bringing the treatment directly to the patient to completely remove the stress of commuting across Manhattan.
Yeah.
That is incredibly practical for someone already exhausted by clinical appointments.
It is the definition of holistic, patient-centered care. Over his 27-plus years in the field, Berkeley has made massive structural contributions to how these therapies are viewed. He actually helped design and implement the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine, or ABORM, to ensure a high standard of specialized care across the industry.
You know, there's a really fascinating irony there. The person who helped establish an entirely Eastern-focused medical board is simultaneously championed by Western reproductive endocrinologists as the ultimate bridge between their two worlds. It proves this isn't an either-or scenario.
You don't have to choose between ancient holistic care and modern science. Medical colleagues and patients alike frequently point to his results-oriented care as proof of concept. He helped establish acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine as highly respected, credible, complementary therapies in reproductive endocrinology. He proved that you can optimize that microcirculation, balance the HPG axis, and scavenge those reactive oxygen species while working hand-in-hand with a traditional fertility clinic.
It really is a masterclass in treating the body as an interconnected system.
Yeah.
So, to bring all of this together for you listening, today we have explored the actual biological architecture of how these treatments work. We've seen how something as seemingly subtle as downregulating a pro-inflammatory cytokine or increasing microcirculation to an ovary through a tiny needle, or using an herb to donate an electron to a rusting cell, can fundamentally alter the entire physical landscape of a fertility journey.
Especially when that journey is guided by specialized pioneers who understand both sides of the coin, like the team at the Berkeley Center. If you or your partner are navigating these exact challenges, you deserve care that addresses every facet of your physiological environment. You can seek personalized, integrative support that actively enhances your medical treatments. The Berkeley Center offers a free consultation to help you understand how this works for your specific case. You can explore their methodology at their website, www.berkeleycenter.com, or reach out to them directly by calling 212-685-0985. Exploring how integrated care can rewrite your fertility story is literally just a phone call away.
Today we've seen how integrating ancient therapies with modern reproductive technology can actively change the microenvironment of the human body to support new life. It really makes you wonder, if simple targeted interventions like a localized microtrauma or a specific herbal antioxidant can fundamentally alter our gene expression and reverse cellular aging to literally create life, what other latent regenerative abilities is the human body hiding, just waiting for the exact right physical signal to unlock them?